Hey everyone, this is just a quick intro before I get into this lesson. This is for those who are just starting After Effects, and if you do not know anything about After Effects, I am going to take you through a bunch of little things, and we're going to end up making something very simple that looks like this. Okay, let's get started. Hey everybody, okay, so like I mentioned in the intro, we're going to cover the basics, the things that we absolutely need to know. When you open After Effects from your dock, like I literally just opened it, you're going to get two options: new composition and new composition from footage. 99% of the time when you're working with clients and any kind of project, you're just going to click on this. The comp one, we're going to name it whatever you feel like. I'm going to name mine, I don't know, Ryan's VFX underscore V1. It's always good practice to name things as versions, okay? When you do stuff like that, it's a good sign. It's like, oh, this person knows what they're doing. Like, they know we will work up to a few revisions till we get to the final result. You'll see basic, advanced 3D render. Stick to basic. Now, when you go to 3D render, make sure you're on classic 3D. Normally it will be. And then when you're in basic, make sure you're in HDTV 2997 or HDTV 24 frames a second. Now, this is usually the normal for YouTube size videos or in Facebook size videos. You have to go over with your client what you want. So I worked on a lot of Instagram videos for Disney emoji, let's just say. So we would have to work on 1080 by 1350, which is the Instagram tall size. Sometimes I would work 1080 by 1080. That's the square size. As you can see, it says 1:1 ratio. And I put the frames at 2997. This is standard for like animation stuff. It just looks smooth, it looks nice. But if you have footage, if you have people, like a camera footage inside, like a Red coming out of a Blackmagic, coming out of a Sony camera, or even a Canon camera, I go with 24 frames a second. This is really good. But we're gonna go with 2997. I'm gonna make my duration. Now, the last part of this time code is actually the number of frames. So if you choose 2997, that means 1 second has 29.97 frames, okay? So we're gonna change our duration to be not this, but this. This is gonna be 5 seconds and 0 frames. Now, background color, black is usually a good idea. If you choose white, it's just not gonna, just go with black for now. And press OK. Now, as you can see, when you press Command K, this is really important, guys. You can go back here and change these settings. I've locked it here. I don't have to, but I can go back and be like 1920 by 1080, and as you can see, it's switched right away to this. You can choose the preset options given over here. So let's go with HDTV 1080 2997. Now, I did that on purpose because let's say you create a composition, you're like, what? I want to change this back. Composition settings, change it back. Now you change the size of your video. And remember, right now, this black screen you're looking at, there's actually nothing there. If you come over here and you look at this toggle transparency grid, you could see that this checkered pattern just means it's transparent. And I'll show you what this means in just a bit. For example, you have to create a background, and it's like, okay, let's go layer, new, solid. But I'm gonna get you in the habit of using shortcuts right away. Command Y, okay? When you press Command Y, you're creating a new solid layer. Let's call this BG, background. The size of this background layer is 1920 by 1080, which, remember, is the same size as your composition. So that's a good habit to keep. It's like, just make sure these match. Usually After Effects is good. They'll just match whatever is with your composition. 100% of comp, 100% of comp, width and height. Or you can just click here, make comp size. You can just change this around and then go back and be like, make comp size. It'll go back to that. Now, we'll make this blue. Let's do that, okay? And what we're gonna do is we are going to now go over a simple text animation. Text is very, very common when it comes to client projects and doing social media work. So let's do this. Let's come up here and we'll choose the text tool, and then we'll click right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press the letter A, and I'm going to choose a font that you'll most likely have. So if you don't see your fonts and stuff here, the best thing to do is go back into workspace and go into standard, okay? Once you do that, it goes back to a standard. This is the After Effects look. Now, obviously these are extra things that I have. You probably don't have those. You probably don't have Prism. That's okay. This is probably what you have. Now, the reason I didn't want to go over this is this and this is this and this is this because it's just boring. I need you to see it in action so that it sticks. So what I've done here, again, I'll just delete this again. Remember we made a background layer? Go back into layer new. You can go text, layer new text, or I'll delete that, or you can go here and be like, this is a text. Now, as you can see, it added a new layer on top because After Effects is a layer-based composition software. So I'll tell you what that means in a bit, but let's press the letter A, for example, okay? And let's choose a font that you'll most likely have, which should be Helvetica. Okay, so let's just say a Helvetica A, okay? Now, every time you see this, you're just gonna click out and it's just gonna be weird and I don't know. All you have to do is click out of this layer and press V. You'll go back to your mouse, okay? Or you can come here and as you can see it says selection tool V. V helps you move things around. You can even hold this corner, hold shift and scale your letters up and down, okay? Now, what's really cool about After Effects is you could literally make anything you feel like related to design. Now, design obviously has a few rules here and there. You have guides to help you. Like, for example, I'll go over this in just a bit, but let's go over this for now. Now, I put the letter text A, right? Now, if I was having trouble with this and I wasn't able to click on it, I just clicked out, I pressed V, and I was able to move it, okay? Now, you want to show your client that, hey, I want to animate this letter, but it's like not in the center. So how do you do that? So we'll come here. This is really important. This whole area is very important. Let's come here and you'll see title action. Title action will help you because this and this and this margin is safe for your titles. This outside region is safe for any people in your frame or any letters and stuff. Like anything that goes outside, it's going to be a problem. But I usually use the proportional grid, and we'll come here and we'll just line it up here. Now you're probably wondering, like, how do I know it's right in the center, right? Command-Alt-Home. This is a very important shortcut because you see this little thing here? That's called the anchor point. When you press Y, you can move this anchor point anywhere you want. So for example, I move it here. That's actually an anchor point where this letter is going to rotate and move relative to this position. Now, what does that mean is, let's come here for a second. A, right? Let's press R for rotation. And you'll see this little tab. So let's do this. And now, since my anchor point is here, it's just rotating around this thing. And that could be handy. It could help. But probably most likely not right now. So what do? Undo, undo. Command-Option-Home. Command-Option-Home puts your anchor point mathematically and optically right in the middle of your subject, whatever you're working with. It might be a letter, it might be an image, anything. So Control-Option-Home or Command-Option-Home. Press V to go back to your mouse and then just go back to your anchor point. And now you see how I lined it up right in the center by zooming in. Oh, by the way, and zooming in is Command minus Command plus, or just scroll up and down with your mouse when you are in this region. Okay. I hope you're with me. If you're not, try to go back 1 or 2 minutes earlier and try it again. But Command-Option-Home will put your anchor point here. Anchor points are very, very important in After Effects. Okay, but here's the deal. I'm going to show you some advanced tips later down the lesson, but I'll go over one advanced tip right now. When you go into Layer, you have a bunch of options. You can create new text, solid, light, camera. You can do a bunch of stuff, and that's fine. Let's do this. This is really important over here, a null object. I'm emphasizing this because a lot of clients want to see if you really know like how to organize your stuff, okay? So organization is really important. Now, I'll tell you this, when you start animating a bunch of letters and there's like too many of these, you got one here, you're like animating this and you're animating this, and there's like a lot going on. You might want to animate everything individually using this layer, but the best practice, the absolute best way to deal with this is to go into layer new null object. Okay, layer new null object, please remember that. And then when you bring it, make sure you center it in Command Option Home again. Now this, what happens is a null object is basically nothing, but it's an object that will move around and stay in the space, but you cannot see it when you render it. It's just there to support what is going on. Now what does that even mean? Basically, check this out. You see this A? Take this whip. You see this whip sign here? It's called a Pickwhip. Take this and attach it to the null object. Attach it to the null object, and you'll see now A is now parented to null 1. Interesting. So now it's like I press V to go back to my mouse and I move this null object, it's moving the whole letter with it. If I press R and I rotate it, it's moving the whole letter with it. Now you might be asking, why did I go this extra step to make sure? I could have just moved my letter. And my null object is right here. Now we can move this. So as you can see, it gave me a much higher level of control on what I want to do. So for example, I have A, I can move this, right? The null's not moving, I'm just moving the A. But I can move this because of this Pickwhip action going on, right? Now I have more control over what's going on. So I highly recommend using this. It's just like such a small thing, but it goes such a long way. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a simple bounce animation before we go on to the next part. So how do we even animate stuff? Very good question. So let's remove this proportional grid. I mean, we don't really need that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this A back here into this null. I'm just gonna roughly bring it into the center. Okay, I'm not being very picky, I'm just focusing on the bouncing animation, okay? So let's do this. You'll probably see these layers as background, fine, A, fine, null. Now remember, you can move the null or you can move the letter, right? And we have two ways to control this. Now let's do this. Let's press P and let's reveal the position by P, okay? So these are your coordinates, Y and X, right? So let's do this. Let's go back to the bit like the timeline here at, let's say 19, let's go to 20 frames. Click the stopwatch here. That basically says this is one position in time. And then let's just go to, I don't know, let's go to 3 seconds. Actually, let's go to 20 frames, then let's go to the next 20 frames, okay? And then let's go down here. Okay, so we're gonna pull the Y and we're gonna just stop it right here. Okay, and then I'm going to travel a little bit further and we're gonna bounce it back up, bring the Y up, we're gonna travel a little bit further, bounce back to the ground a little bit further. Okay, we're gonna just space this out just a bit because it gets a little bit quicker. So space this out, and then we're gonna go back up, but not as high as before. Back down, okay, and then back up just a little bit, and then quickly back down. Okay, so we have this thing going on, which is fine. It's just when you play this by pressing space, it looks super weird. That's not a real bounce. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna space these out so it's a little bit more realistic. So let's bring it back, 20. Okay, let's bring this closer, bring this closer, bring this closer, this one as well, this one as well, and this. Now, when you normally keyframe this stuff, that's what these are, keyframes, positions in time. And when you do this, it's almost like, okay, well, this doesn't look realistic. So what do? Highlight all the keyframes, I'll right click them, keyframe assistant, easy ease. This usually helps this situation just a bit, okay? But let's highlight all these keyframes, okay? Now remember, you went from square keyframes to keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now you're gonna see this bar here. This is very, very important. You're gonna see that your bounce is happening with this type of speed curve, okay? This is what your graph basically looks like. And this over here, this is called the graph editor. Another very important aspect of After Effects. when we have our A, when it falls to the ground, what happens? It's actually quite slow, and it picks up energy as it goes up, as it speeds up, right? It's like, whoa, right? So that's what we really need. We need that initial movement like that. So this graph is now more realistic to what gravity on Earth feels like, right? So we need it to go, whoop, that's our speed. The speed increases as the gravitational pull has more effect on our A, right? So boom. Now what happens when it bounces back up? It's like pretty quick, right? So we need to move this graph up this way. Okay, so now it's like it just bounces right back up, like just like that, right? Now what happens when it's all the way up in the air? It starts getting slower. So we'll leave this, and then what happens here when it hits the ground again? It speeds up again because it just smacked the ground. So we're gonna leave this, okay? We're gonna speed this up, okay? And you see that? Boom. Okay, now this one, what we'll do is make sure you click out, make sure this graph stays unaffected. Come back here. Now remember, here, boom, it hit the ground again, right? Actually, let me just make sure I emphasize that it actually hit the ground. And boom, it picks up energy again. Boom, and then finally rests. Okay, so what we went over here is we went from a really janky bounce to something that looks a little bit more realistic. I mean, we can still work on it. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna highlight everything again. We're gonna go back in our graph editor. And now after the first bounce, what we need to do is these two, remember, we didn't touch those. So what happens here? It actually gets affected by the gravitational pull slowly. So let's do that. Let's do that. So as you can see, I kind of just used my own intuition to pull these two graphs the way a bounce should look. Boom. That looks a lot better. Okay, so what do I do with this null, right? I could have just animated this on the A, right? But here's the deal. What we can do is we'll take all these keyframes, I'll copy them, and I'll paste it on my null. Now, you can press U to reveal all your keyframes, and let's just bring this null down here. Okay, and let's just remove these keyframes for the A. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that it bounces to the bottom of the frame and just bringing this back. So I'm moving all the keyframes by highlighting all the keyframes and moving everything up. Okay, let's do that. Here we go. Okay, so now basically what I did is I'm just animating this bounce using my null. I'm not doing it using the A. You can move the A and it will still do that because why? The null is just moving in that action. Now this helps. The reason we do a null on top is, and we parent this letter to a null, is because when you go back to your letter and you press R, like rotation, let's say, now you don't have to mess with too many keyframes on your letter. You can do some advanced stuff here. You can like come here, you can like spin it, and then right click and highlight these and easy ease these. And now all of a sudden, after the first bounce, you know, you can like do some cool stuff. And then of course that didn't look very smooth, but you can work around these things. And that's why it really helps having a null, because you have more control over your stuff. So I'll highlight this. Maybe I'll change this graph to look more like that. Now all of a sudden, my A has a lot more character. Okay, so I know I covered a lot of things in this first lesson, but I hope this is a good start, because now I'm going to turn it up a little bit. I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit, and it's really going to get more and more interesting. Okay, I'll see you in the next class.